Hi, my name is Martin Purnell, and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church, and where we can meet and hear from those that have made the faith count. This podcast series is to encourage via conversation. You can contact us as well by email, ogc@accessradio.biz. That's biz spelt B-I-Z, of course. So please enjoy today's guest, and it's another of our special podcast topics. If you're a regular listener, you most probably have heard me say a few times, how do you spell faith? The answer is R-I-S-K. To discuss what this means is our guest from episode 133, who trained as a social worker in her native Australia. She has lived with her family in Thailand before settling in Birmingham, UK. Our guest today is now a United Reformed minister and is passionate about social justice. Episode 133 gives further insight into why they moved to Thailand and the faith needed, which yielded surprising and amazing results. So who better to discuss faith and what that means than today's special guest? And a welcome return to the Reverend Anji Barker. Angie, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And all the hassles you've had as well, being a good neighbour. I just let people know that you very kindly helped out the neighbour next door because she had just given birth. So what a great person you are. How are you keeping, by the way?
She hasn't had the baby yet, in labour.
Got you. Great stuff. Well, let's go for it then. If you can stay awake, that is, because obviously it's been a long day for you already. Question 1, and these are the 5 alternative interest getter questions. Let's see how you get on. Beethoven is transported to your home and he wants to hear what music is like in 2023. What gig or concert would you take him to, please, Angie?
Oh, gosh, this is really showing my lack of taste in music, but any boy band that's regrouped.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Westlife, Boys to Men, Backstreet Boys, any of those, NSYNC. Yep.
Wow. How come you like boy bands then?
Oh, I just like the style of music. I find it's calming. So I'm quite well known for working in the URC office. I need white noise to block out sound, help me concentrate, and I just play One Direction on a loop. It's the same loop. It's been for about 18 months. So it means I can block everything else out. So there you go.
Never heard of them. If I was being stereotypical, I thought you were going to say Men at Work or Ice House even. They were a great band.
Oh, yeah. Well, I like lots of different music, but I'm not very a music aficionado, but I like a certain type of calming music.
Oh, got you. Yeah, some great bands that come out of Australia. I could bore you to death with the number of bands that...
Midnight Oil would be probably one of our... Depends if you're dancing or if you're just wanting to listen to music. So
yes,
for dancing, it's AC/DC and Midnight Oil and, bands like that. Cold Chisel, Jimmy Barnes is a big favourite.
Jimmy Barnes, very good. Yes, also Sherbet from the 1970s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, how's that?
And Skyhooks.
The Mixtures, of course, with a Push Bike song.
Oh, well,
I even bought that as a single when it came out. Of course, the Easy Beats, they were big in the 60s. Moving swiftly on. If you could go back in time and watch any sporting event or entertainment event live with a front row seat, what would it be, please?
Live Aid, definitely. I would have given anything to be there. I've watched replays of that ad nauseum. I'm a massive fan of Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie. I've been to the sing-along session. But just the combination of incredible music and a great cause and the hope, I think, looking back on it, the sadness that it didn't end world poverty, but world hunger. But yeah, I think definitely the vibe there would be what I'd want to be part of.
Yeah, 13th of July, 1985. You're not going to like me. I was there.
Oh, no. Wow, yes.
Yeah. 12 heads from the front, right in the centre, for when the Quo started.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Can't believe that was 40 years ago. I can remember so much about it.
Gosh.
Good choice. Question 3. If you could invite any biblical character for an evening meal so that you could ask them questions, who would it be? And then what would you cook them, please?
Probably Peter after he denied Jesus. And I'd ask him, how did he come back from that? So how did he come back from his biggest shame?
Yeah.
So quite interested in how we recover and face our shame and live in that. And what would I cook him? I probably wouldn't because that'd be cruel. I'm a terrible cook. But Mr. Morrison or Mr. Asda would have something I could assemble for him, I'm sure, in the oven. Yeah, so any kind of ready-baked thing that I could take out the foil and make it look like I've cooked myself. That's what I do.
With a sprinkling of cheese on.
Yes, someone once said about me, I don't cook, I assemble. Yes.
That's a very good line. That's a good answer, actually. I think Peter would be a cracking person to have a chinwag with. He would have experienced virtually every kind of emotion going, I would have thought. Question 4. What do you remember most about your wedding day and why?
I think I remember it was about 33 degrees. And I think I remember that because it was very hot and sweaty and we were having photos done on the beach, and it looked like one of those tropical thunderstorm type things, not tropical because it was Melbourne, but at the end of a really hot day, you have a cool change. And so I was very conscious that it might rain on my photos. Sorry, Ash, I didn't remember much about Ash, just all about the thing.
And the photos turned out okay?
The photos were great. They won some awards or something back in the 80s. Yes.
Wow. Question 5. What do you consider to be your favourite film of all time? And I'll accept the top 3 if that helps you.
I really like a film with Ben Stiller and Edward Norton called Keep the Faith. And it's kind of a comedy about a Jewish rabbi and a Catholic priest and Jenna Elfman is the protagonist in the story, and they both fall in love with her. And I really love that because it's entertaining rom-com, but it was really good around the issues of faith and inclusion and, working together. So I've watched it loads of times. And then probably the second one would be Bohemian Rhapsody, the story about Freddie Mercury, obviously, which I've watched ad nauseum. Yeah, I think those 2.
I haven't seen either. I have to look out for them. Well, I know about Bohemian Rhapsody, of course. So let's go for it then. Faith and what that means to you. So what does, first of all, faith mean to you?
I think probably it means action. I think it means living a life differently and with purpose. For me, I have friends who would call themselves atheists, and they do great things and help lots of people in the community. And I always think of myself as more selfish than them, because they do that with nothing back. I do that because I feel empowered by the love of God and because I have a faith that drives me and makes me believe that that is my call to life. So we always have this conversation that, well, we're really the same. I'm more selfish because I need to know I'm doing this as part of something bigger, and I need the warm and fuzzy that my faith journey gives me in the service that I do.
And when you talk to your atheist friends who think they're doing something good as well, what do they say back to you when you say that to them?
Not much, really. I think they say, well, we share values. I think often people have an issue with the church, not really with God. And the church hasn't been the most loving, accepting and welcoming place and continues to be. Sadly, I wish I was talking about historically, but I think that's still very much a blockage for people. But God is at work in his creation and through the people he's created. So I see all gifts that people use as something that comes from God. And I guess for me, my faith is about how do I express that overtly as well as covertly, as well as non-spoken in my action. And it's my faith that resources me. I don't think my friendship is enough to change people's lives. I feel like it's the work of the Holy Spirit that actually does the transformation. I think my friendship can encourage people, can give people someone to do this work with together, but I don't ever think that's enough and that people need to experience that kind of purpose beyond human consciousness, which I believe is the power of God in their lives.
Well, that's 2 great words, overtly and covertly. So let's go for the exciting bit in some ways. Covertly, how is your faith covertly expressed?
Well, it's not intentional to be covert because, I don't believe in, I always say the cost of my friendship is not your soul. I'm not doing things to try and, helping people so that they will believe a set of beliefs I want to give them. But I think covertly is that if we truly live a different life, and that's what Jesus modelled, was a life that was countercultural, that was risky, that was confrontational sometimes. I think if we truly live differently and are making a difference in our communities and in the lives of others, that people will sense the work of God and the work of the Holy Spirit in what we do without really us having to say we're doing this because we're a group of Christians changing our community. At the same time, I want to be really open about my motivations, but I think my motivations are not that kind of old-fashioned idea that I'm going to give people food so that they'll pray a prayer and become Christians. My motivation is, as a Christian, I'm called to feed the hungry, visit those in prison, clothe the naked. I was saying this in a church on Sunday that years ago I preached a sermon. It was Isaiah 58. And I was thinking about, all those ministries. We have people who house the homeless, who visit those in prison, visit people in hospital. But I've never heard of anyone with a ministry to the nude. And it got me, what would your brochure look like? Because in that same passage it says, clothe the naked. I went off on a tangent. But anyway.
Oh, very good, very good.
But God does call us to, as Christians, to follow the model that Jesus gave. And it shouldn't really be seen as covert, but that against kind of the markers of church where we want people to be out preaching and saying you need to turn and burn. To me, that was how I use the term covert. It's just being authentically who you are in Christ. And then also there is place in church for being really overt in today we're going to be discussing this particular passage, or we're going to be running a Bible study group looking at how people can, develop their skills as followers of Jesus, develop their knowledge of the Bible, But so those are kind of overt things where we invite people very clearly to that. But I would always say that the cost of my friendship is not people's souls. And so that's probably what more I meant. But I believe as we live as Christians, we have an impact on the lives of others around us in a more covert sense.
But you've also described, actually, well, you didn't realise this, but there was loads of background noises whilst you were speaking, like pots and pans falling on the floor and doorbells ring. And what people don't know is that behind the scenes, you are actually being overt in your faith, and with your husband as well, because you're inviting people into your house at this moment in time to help them out by learning how to speak English properly.
Yeah.
That's something, because eventually I would have thought people would want to know more about you as a Christian. So how often would that come up in conversation?
All the time. I mean, weekly. There's often a weekly thing. There's new people that come to the house every day. The house is a women and children's centre downstairs. We live upstairs, and people often say, "Oh, how do you feel letting people into your house?" And I said, well, God's given us this house and it's a resource for everybody, not just for us. And so it's a constant chance as you do things a little bit differently to the norm for people to ask the questions themselves that they want to know. So I think God uses all things about us. And, over time, those things become normal to us, that you have an open home, that you take people in who are homeless. But for new people, as they meet you, it's often one of the first distinctive that they see, and they'll say, well, as a Christian, if God has given me something I can do about somebody's need, I'm called to respond to that. That's my Christian duty. And that becomes a different kind of understanding of the church and Christians they may have met before, who are trying to get them to believe a set of beliefs before they're accepted into anything. So I think we assume faith. We assume that everybody is on a journey, that God has created all people, and I just assume that everyone wants to be part of this. So you just join them in and you just be as normal as you can about how you join people in, rather than sit them down and give them a talk about, what we used to do in the 80s and 90s, the 4 spiritual laws, and make them pray a prayer, and even if they don't want to. And then now they're in and they can partake. So it's letting people partake.
Yeah, and I think you just summed up beautifully there, whereas in the past we see all the traditional films of missionaries going out in the 18th and 19th century. Obviously, we didn't have films in those days, but you know what I mean. It's like they would hold the cross and they'd be preaching a word, hoping that people would come to them on that. Actually, it's the complete reversal.
It's about living the word, isn't it? Living the word and being authentically yourself. And that also makes a much more real faith, because I also stuff up and I also have days where I'm angry at God and don't wonder if I'm doing the right thing or have done something wrong. And we've got to share those things as well. We have to be really authentic about it's not a simple blueprint. And I think, and then as we journey honestly with people, they then open up honestly as well. So, so that's my best effort at it anyway this week. Yeah.
That's very good. Well, okay, then let's stoke it up a bit more then, if that's okay, because I've often made reference, as I did in episode 133, Starring Your Good Self, about how do you spell faith? And the answer is R-I-S-K. And you really picked up on that. And that's how we thought, right, we'll do a podcast accordingly, hence today's special podcast. So, risk then. Tell me more about what you think risk is and how that affects us in our faith.
Well, I think it's a very unpopular posture to be in, some being willing to take risk in the West. And actually, if we think about most of the developing world, they live in constant risk. And so somehow we've tried to develop a model of mission and ministry that we can, save people and make a difference and impact people's poverty and trauma and stay safe at the same time. And I don't think you can. I think as soon as you step out to love people who are living in trauma, dealing with real struggles in life, that is the first risk you take, because suddenly you're not in control anymore. So risk is about surrendering that control and trusting that God's present. And I think it's also asking the why questions. There's so many things that I'm told since I've lived in England you can't do. But when you ask why and you understand the why, you can do them, and you can often do them quite safely. So it's not accepting no, it's about saying, well, there's a need to respond, or there's something our community want to do together. And when we're told no, what are the barriers and how can we break those down? How can we mitigate some of those things? But also some of it, you just say, I'm willing to hold that risk. I'm willing to be the person responsible to hold that risk.
Well, give us an example then, please.
Well, I think an example would be we took over a big old church. It's a huge building. We took it over in COVID. During COVID, our neighbourhood, which is largely Black and Afro-Caribbean, a lot of people took up roller skating. And those of us who were teenagers in the 70s, we all roller skated. And I thought, look, we've got this big old building. We could roller skate. And so let's make a roller skating rink, a place where people can come in and roller skate. And of course, people go, oh, you can't do that. I said, why? Well, if people fall and break their arm, the church will be liable. So I rang up our insurance and said, can you get me roller skating insurance? And for £349 a year, I have roller skating insurance. And then we did a risk assessment. There's plenty of roller skating risk assessments out there that you can find online. We adapted it to our particular needs. The issue we had is our upstairs, which is the wooden floor. We didn't have money to fix the upstairs, but we realised our carpet downstairs was very hard, old church carpet. And if we moved everything out the way, we could roller skate quite happily there. So there was a bit of toing and froing with the insurance company to make sure they understand it was on carpet, not hard floor. So they had to rewrite the policy to hard carpet because they didn't want someone to break their arm and then they say, oh, it's carpet, we don't have to pay out.
Because it got carpet burns, for instance.
Yeah, they do. That's exactly right. So we have roller skating insurance. Someone gave me 30 pairs of roller skates. We bought another 30 pairs and we've had a roller skating rink since 2021. And now about 120 people, adults and children, roller skate in our church every week for free. The other issue around the no is if we try to do it as a fundraiser, which is straight away where churches go, wow, this is successful, we should charge. But if we do that, we have a whole nother level of liability that we need. So if we put on free roller skating as a charity and as a church for the community, we pay staff members to be there. So it's a cost. Risk always involves a cost. So we're willing to pay for the staff to be there rather than go, oh, we could raise money. So we raise money a different way to pay the staff. Then we can provide a free roller skating rink. And now we've, in the last 8-10 months, we've been able to fix the upstairs up and we have roller skating upstairs and downstairs. So the beginners start on the carpet and there's usually 30-40 people upstairs and then maybe 20-30 people downstairs for each session. And then there's an adults group and a teenage group and 2 kids clubs because there's so many kids who want to roller skate. So if we had just taken no because of the rules, once we understood the rules, sometimes the rules make sense and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a poor interpretation of safeguarding that people say, well, you can't do that because of safeguarding. Well, that's a very poor understanding of safeguarding. We are actually keeping kids safe. So it's about understanding the rules, challenging the ones that are stupid or that do not make sense in my Christian language, and then working out where we can do it safely. Yeah. So again, we wanted to work with young people around knife crime years ago. So a friend of ours, Shane Claiborne, you may well know of, he was chopping up guns and turning guns into ploughshares. And we thought, well, knife crime is a big issue in our community. I contacted the local police station and they had a whole evidence locker, which is a massive big room full of bins, full of knives and swords and machetes that they had confiscated from people that had been used in evidence in court. And then when it's finished, they just sat there. So I thought, what if we developed a blacksmithing forge where we could take these and turn them into jewellery, garden implements, whatever, based on the same idea of what the guys in America were doing. So then, of course, you go to your trustees and they say, well, no, because a gas or a coke forge, they're quite dangerous. So we worked out, well, what if I went and did a blacksmithing course so I could work out what the risks are? Then we can write the risk assessment and then we can do this. So we've since 2019, we've had a blacksmithing forge running.
And you're the blacksmith?
Well, I'm not now because then I was able to get the person who taught me, but it was a brilliant blacksmith teacher. So eventually we paid him, we raised some money to pay him to train some local blacksmiths who now run it. But I did the first little bit so that we could risk assess it, we could do it safely. So you can do some, and for teenagers, they love edgy things. Yeah. So of course, what do? You've got to grind the blades off first because you don't want to be handing them knives to them start meddling. And of course, every teenager wants to make a letter opener. And we're like, when have you ever owned a letter? That's like their code. So they've made things like little badges. They've made garden hooks. They've made, there's at the front of our church is bunches of flowers, 2 big bunches of flowers high up that had hanging baskets on them till they were stolen, made out of knives from the evidence locker. Yeah. So you can do risky activities, but you just need to know what the barriers are. And then you also mitigate some of that. But at the same time, sometimes you do have to step out and take a bit of a risk and then work it out a bit later. Yeah. But I think in terms of faith, to put that from a practical to a kind of more at a spiritual level, I feel like so often people are missing from our churches because we're boring, we're not exciting. And I was talking to some other friends who are ministers, they've got adult children, they've done some pretty exciting ministry and mission over their lives, and yet none of their adult children are in the church. And our conclusion was, you know, they want to meet people that share their passion for excitement, and they're largely missing in our churches because we've made Christianity such a safe, boring, white, polite, organised religion that it's so unattractive to people who are naturally attracted to risky, you know, why are our young people joining a lot of these secular things like Greenpeace and others? I'm not allowed to mention probably.
I think you can still mention that word. We're not banned from saying those two words in a sentence yet.
So why are our young people taking those actions? And really they should be taking those actions on behalf of the church, probably, some of those things, fighting for our environment, fighting for safety and fighting against war. But we don't often allow for that. We've just made it too nice. And I think Jesus was, in the end, he was killed because he was messy and risky and was seen to be doing things in an unordered way. You know, he was hanging out at parties and he was saying things that didn't quite fit into the structure. And so a faith that Jesus modelled is so much more exciting than the average kind of model of church and faith that we have today. And I believe is the reason why so many people are leaving the church. It's interesting, people in my age group are all starting to do extreme things. My husband does Caminos. He's on about his third one. You know, he'll go and walk 156 kilometres. He just came back on Friday. People are doing cold water swimming, rock climbing, mega marathons. And I know why, because we're wanting the endorphins that comes from doing something exciting and a bit edgy. And shouldn't that be what we get from living out our faith, from changing our communities, from living as a Christian community of worshippers, doing really exciting things that gives us those endorphins that we don't necessarily need to? We might still want to go and do some of those things, but we're not looking for that in the same way.
Okay, so those that are listening today saying, well, this is great, I feel really challenged by it. But obviously you're going to get the stuck in the mud type Christians who are saying, yes, that's all very good, but what's the evidence? Why is it worth doing it? How would you answer them then?
Well, I think that it's worth taking risks if it makes a difference to someone else's life. So if we can make a difference in somebody else's life and see them living a more abundant life, then the risk is worth it. So you don't just do risk for risk's sake. I can give you an example. So
yeah, please.
We have a local hospital. A brand new hospital was built. They combined two under-resourced hospitals together to one mega hospital in a highly deprived area full of exempt accommodation and HMOs.
HMOs being?
Houses of multiple occupancy.
Right.
And exempt accommodation are houses that are not registered, where they put loads of people coming out of prison, people with mental health, drug addiction. So the same criteria for people. And so we have a huge percentage of the houses in this direct area are used like that. The result is lots of families are homeless. I think it's at 6,700 families in Birmingham are now homeless because we have all those family homes have now been turned into housing for complex people. We don't have more than about 11,000 complex people in Birmingham, but we have now taken on 31,000 because we're taking people's complex people from all over the country because we have so many beds available. So this hospital, after a year, it was a year old in August. Within 6 months of opening, it was I think, the most violent A&E in the country. I came back from some time overseas. First week I was back, I spent about 7 hours in A&E with a friend trying to help them out, and there was police everywhere. There were people screaming, yelling. There was homeless people camped out front. It was a disaster. A lot of aggression and violence. So I thought, how can we as a group of Christians respond to this? What if those of us who have a bit of experience with complex people volunteered our time on a Friday night, a bit like chaplaincy, but there's no point volunteering our time when it's quiet. So we volunteer our time. We started in July from 8 at night till 4 in the morning at A&E every Friday night. Now, people would say, oh, that's a risk. What about liability? What if something happens? Well, we took that risk on. We all signed that we are doing this voluntarily and we're aware of the risk. If something happens to me, something happens to me. Done. The hospital also took a big risk. So the head of A&E, he is allowing us to be all through the department, resus, ambulance bay, giving us passes to be all through the department to be able to support them. So the way he mitigates that risk is it's done under the charity Newbigin Trust, who I'm a volunteer for. So his risk is satisfied because the charity is taking on the risk. The charity has volunteer liability. The church volunteers for the charity. So we've worked out a way. But it's still a risk, isn't it?
Yeah.
It could have gone really bad. It can still go bad. So we have now just completed the stats for 3 months. But by just loving on people, we have no idea. We couldn't foresee what we were going to see, that we would be showering people, we would be picking drunks off the floor, we would be putting people in Ubers, taking people down to McDonald's for a meal, whatever the need arises, and it's different every week. We try to respond to the non-clinical need. But what it's beautifully done is, I think there's 8 people now in such a short time that have already started coming to our church every day. So the people we've met who come to A&E because they're lonely, we've been able to divert them to come to the drop-in centre. So the beautiful thing for the church is we've now taken on very complex people who were going to A&E who are now coming to the church. And again, we don't do it alone. There's Newbigin Trust is the charity with a lot of experience that we're part of. But had we not taken the risk, it sounds very risky. And I remember when I floated it with some church ministers saying, would you like to be part of it? They were all concerned about the risk of that, how risky it would be. But the risk is more to the patients than us. And in the end, it's been an absolute blessing. So I would like to think that's the kind of faith that we'd want to live. We'd find a situation, we'd look at what resource we can be, and we can help try and resolve it. There were the 3 months leading up to us being there every Friday night, there were 24 violent incidents in A&E for those Friday nights. The 3 months since we've been doing it, there's been 4, and 2 of them have happened on the night. There was one night we didn't go because we were all at Greenbelt. So there's been 2 essentially on the times we haven't been there. Through the rest of the A&E department, ambulance area, AMU, resus, all of those areas, critical care, they went from 69 violent incidents down to 24 in the time we've been there. So we can show that as a group of people, we've made a massive difference.
Wow.
And as a church, we're really blessed by being able to say that is our contribution to our community.
Yeah.
And we're not doing it to try and lead people to Jesus. We're doing it because as Christians, we get a chance to show Christian compassion and love and connection to people who often have nobody. A lot of the people that we support are elderly people who have come in the middle of the night on their own, and then they're left sitting for 7 hours. And we can give them a cup of tea, we can give them a sandwich, we can sit with them and chat. Or when they're waiting for patient transport to go home and it's going to be 6 hours, we can go in an Uber with them and support them getting home so they don't have to wait 6 hours. So, yeah, it is a risk, but it's one that is making a massive difference in people's lives. So,
right. Mr. Stuck in the Mud here would say, who's listening to this, it's all very well, this is very good, but, and they would immediately start to list off all the things, such as, yes, but you've got the other faiths there. You're going to be putting their nose out of joint. You've got other faiths coming in who need help. They're not wanting to talk to you. You could come up with a list of so many things.
Well, we're not there to tell people. We're not there to tell people about Jesus. We're there to model the life of Jesus by wiping people's faces and picking them up off the ground and giving them food and helping them get to the right medical person at the time they need it when they don't hear their name being called. I mean, we take them out for a cigarette, those who can't get themselves out there and are kicking off because they need a cigarette, those type of things. But I believe that people ask, oh, you guys are volunteers, we clearly have it on the T-shirt. And then I say, yeah, we're from the Lodge Road Church. And then people come down and check us out.
That's what you do.
Yeah. And so a lot of the people we had the other week was very awkward. We had a really unwell mentally ill man who was just going through the waiting room screaming, Tommy Robinson, Tommy Robinson. And not only most of the waiting room were from multi-ethnic backgrounds, but so were all the staff. Yeah. You know, so we're able to support the staff in that and be there and just say, look, please don't speak to them like that, you know, and try and help de-escalate and prevent it kicking off between patients who were being offended by him. So we took him outside. We try to distract things and prevent things. But yeah, so I don't see where the issue is. I think the issue is if we want to be there so we can sit down and, you know, pray a prayer over people so they become a Christian. But I don't think that's how Jesus ever did it. And I don't know why we've made such a weird form of Christianity that's just weird, that tells people we have to tell them what to believe.
I would have said the biggest risk that you'd have had, or the biggest step of faith, because faith without risk, and we'll talk about, is useless later on if that's okay, or faith without deeds is useless, which is a Bible reference.
Yeah.
The biggest step of faith was the moment you had to make contact for the first time with somebody in the NHS. So how did that come about?
Well, I think that we had some contacts, and one of my volunteers who works with me is my friend who was in the NHS, and then we'd been going to some meetings feeding back patient experience. We were We also advocate in that space with people who've been frequent attenders in A&E. And so we happened to meet the right person, and I just said, look, this is an idea we've got. And they said, could you put it in writing? So I put it in writing. They sent it to powers that be. We've tried it about 3 years ago, and the powers that be thought it was too risky. This time they thought, yeah, let's do it. And so it was just the right person who was also a risk taker, who manages A&E, who's a younger person. And again, I think about that person, and I think there's no way a person like him would want to be in any of our churches because they'd be bored. But they find their mission and ministry in the NHS, being able to take risks, like, you know what I mean? So again, it goes back to the sort of people that survive in our churches without seeing it as a problem are a certain type of people. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want the churches to grow and to be more diverse, we have to address this issue of risk, because if we present such a boring, controlled, organised version of Christianity, it's no wonder why people don't want to be part of it now. So we think if we just tell people what to believe, and if they just come along to a course and learn about what the Bible says, they'll join. I think if we're showing people how exciting life can be as followers of Jesus, that is more attractional to our faith than telling people what to believe.
2 verses then, one biblical, one maybe not so biblical. The first one is obviously faith without deeds is useless. And the second one is something that's attributed to St. Francis of Assisi that I've said ad nauseum, which is a play on the Great Commission. Go out and preach the good news to all generations, and if all else fails, it's the added bit.
Use
words. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can say that, I heard that at Bible college, and, 36 years ago, you can say that ad nauseum. The question people always ask us when they come and see the context is, when do you tell people about Jesus?
Yeah.
And I'm like, have you not been watching? Hopefully we're doing that by the fact that we live differently. And I would say faith without works is dead. I'd say faith without works isn't faith. And I'd also say faith without risk isn't faith, because by its very nature, faith is supposed to be taking that risk into the unknown and the unseen. And what we try to do is risk assess everything out of it, because the whole idea of a risk assessment, isn't it, is to foreplan what the risks will be and make sure you have mitigation in place. But when we're working with people, we can never know that. And if we know that, well, we're probably not listening. And God calls us to step into the spaces where He is at work. And so I think that we kill our faith when we try to control it. So I think Richard Rohr talks about the opposite of faith is not doubt, the opposite of faith is control. And I think that control and risk thing, so faith is all about risk, and control is all about not having risk.
Yeah, the opposite of faith is control. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, to make it more personal now then, no names, no pack drill. But obviously people can say, you're full of risk, this is great. You ended up in court several months ago, as I say, we're not going to name what it was about, for something by showing Christ's love in action. A bit like the Good Samaritan, you went and helped out a family. Little did you know at the time that it was going to end up in court, of which you weren't found guilty. It wasn't to do with you, it was to do with the other people. For what you went through, if I got you back in my time machine and put you back to that first time you met this family, would you do it again?
Yeah, for sure. And just to be careful, I didn't end up in court. I was actually overseas, but I did a witness statement for the case. But still, when the police contact you and say, want to interview you about something, you do panic, don't you?
Yeah.
And then I had to quickly think, what did we do? Did we follow all the right steps? But it was a risk, because we helped some people very unaware of a very deep issue that they had been involved in that eventually had them charged and sentenced to a long time in prison. But I think so, because the alternative was to allow somebody to sleep on a cold street at night. And so I think you do take those risks, but I think we're an extreme case. I think most people wouldn't be in those scenarios. You wouldn't know that those people, they wouldn't know the people who know those people. So we've been doing this a long time. And in Birmingham, we've been in this one neighbourhood for 11 years. So I don't think you go zero from I live in my suburban house and I've never met a drug user to, oops, now I'm going to be in court. But I think you do make decisions over time that you're going to choose to interface with people who are struggling, and that will involve risk. And gradually the next logical step. So we talk about where you stand determines what you see. So we have intentionally been standing in the most extreme places that we can find, including this neighbourhood. And so, I don't want to give people false scare. That's not the first thing that's going to happen. And also, we don't do it alone. It wasn't us. It wasn't me on my own doing it. It was a whole group of us. So we hold relationships as a team of people, as a community of people. So, and I think that is a thing where people can tell you all the bad stories about risk and where it went wrong for somebody. It's always one person doing something, and we never do anything as one person. Even after 36 years of ministry, I don't ever go to someone's house on my own. I don't do things. I'm always got somebody with me. One, because I just don't feel that comfortable. I want to share it around. It's sometimes hard to work out what to talk about. You've got a second person, you can banter, but also it just holds you accountable. It always means there's somebody else there, and it also just keeps you safer. So again, when we take risks and we get involved with people, we don't do that on our own. We do that as a community of Christians together.
Yes. I'd like people to, if they haven't already, to listen to episode 133 to hear more about what you and Ash, and then you on your own, have done in your life together, especially with regard to Thailand and beyond, just to give it a bit of a better flavour, shall we say. So let's just imagine then that I am now your manager. I'm taking you on a world tour of all the churches like we used to go through in the 80s. You have to go and hear this evangelist. Coming to hear Anji Barker talking about faith and what it means and how you spell faith, R-I-S-K.
Yeah.
Trouble is, you've only got 5 minutes because they've got some famous band to come on, something like that.
Yeah.
What would you say to them in 5 minutes?
Oh, gosh, wow. I think I would say that what we need is people to live and worship in their local communities first, so that we can be authentically who we are. So our churches, I'm really about hyper-local, that if you live and work in your neighbourhood and live and minister in your neighbourhood, and that is your local church, it does allow you to engage with a lot more people because you become a known character in the neighbourhood. And I think that I always ask the question is, does my church look like my neighbourhood? And if not, why? And if not, who is missing? So my role in the URC church at the West Midlands is to help churches think about that question. If our churches are in decline, who is not in our church? It's not about fixing our church. It's about looking at who is not there and why. And then what can we do with the resources we have to create something that will connect for people who are missing from our church? And so we ask that question, pretty much monthly. I ask myself that question in my own context, because it's never static. Neighbourhoods are changing all the time. You find little cliques form as you start to help certain groups of people. So it's a dynamic thing. Who is missing from our communion table? Who is missing from our place of worship? Why? And what is it that we can do differently to allow that to be a different story? And I think probably in this day and age, it's the style of what we call church that needs to be changed for different types of people to be present in our churches. So not everybody wants to come and be talked at and have some songs and a prayer. Some people like to come and discuss faith and tease out ideas and very interactive. And other people like to do walks together that can also be very much church and do active things together and talk about a topic around faith. So it's starting to see other things that if God created us with all these things we like doing, why is the thing I least like doing, which is sitting still and listening, the only way I can worship God? So for me, I had to ask that question very early on. How can I worship God with people who are similar to me doing things together?
Yes.
So that my faith stays active, but I'm not bored. Other people, it doesn't mean it's wrong to be someone who likes to sit. My husband loves going to lectures and talks. So the structure and the form of church that is the dominant one that we have, he really enjoys. But there's so many different styles of approach in life. Why is the church still in just that one style? Variations of it, but just one style. And so I think the future of our churches is to be more creative in our expressions of worship, so that we look at those in our neighbourhoods who are not currently in church and see themselves as part of church will feel included.
That's great. That's in less than 5 minutes as well, really. I can't remember who it was, a previous guest, who said that in their particular church or a nearby church, it's like you all turn up, but because it's quite big, you've got separate rooms. So if you want to go and have a discussion, you can. If you want to hear a sermon with me, you can. If you want to go for a walk or whatever, you can do all these things. It's just that you start off in the church and you finish in the church.
Together. Yeah, what a great model. What a great model that you start with maybe a breakfast. There was a church that we were supported by for years in Australia, which had people starting in the more traditional churches of Christchurch. Some people were having the charismatic experience, so wanted to have a more charismatic service. So they said, the minister cleverly said, okay, well, you start it. That's good. I'll be there, but you start it. Let's show me how you want it to be. And so there was 2 services. Then another group didn't like that. They said, we want to do a Taze service, contemplative. So he says, all right, you start that. I'll be there. So here's a room. And what would happen is you'd go there to speak, and you would speak at the more traditional service. And as soon as your talk bit was over, you would be wheeled out across to the next room. The church was built but in a circle, to the Taze service where you'd share in that. And then at the end of that, you would all have morning tea together, and the more charismatic Baptist style family service, or probably Pentecostal style service, would all be arriving, and they'd have morning tea with you. So you're all still one congregation. Then they would go in and you'd go in and speak at their service. And at night they had kind of the youth one. And I thought that was a lovely model of, you can do all of these styles and still see yourself as one congregation. And we kind of have that at Lodge Road Church, and they're all small. So for us, people find meaning and purpose in a group of about 25, 30 people. When it gets beyond that, you can be not known in a group bigger than that. But we have 2 services of about that size that still see themselves as part of the same church. So then effectively you have 60, 70 people that see themselves as part of Lodge Road Church congregation, but they meet separately. But during the week, they're at everything together. You know, there's a lot of crossover, or not at everything, but a lot of crossover. So I love that model. And I think that's not the only model. I think there's so many creative people out there that can create different models. And the only thing stopping us, I think, is being scared to take risks. So people have tried something like a breakfast and only one person came, so then they've stopped it. But if it fails, that's just the method. The idea is probably right. You've just got to find the right method. The mission is right. The mission is to see different styles of worship, that everybody can find a home, and a group that they belong to. And so the Methodist Church is doing some great stuff in the pioneering. Well, they've got Brick Church. It's like Lego Church, but because of copyright, they have to call it Brick Church. They've got a group that meet up north, that walk a prayer labyrinth on a beach and then go for a walk together, and others walking on the beach have joined that group, and it's growing, and they all do the prayer labyrinth. There's groups that are doing yoga church. There's groups that are doing painting church. We've often, in our early days, we had a lot of creative people, and so we would read a scripture together, and everyone would draw or paint a picture and paint themselves in that. And we'd read that scripture a bit like an examen or a lectio divina 2 or 3 times. We'd have some time of prayer, and then I would get them to share their picture. And that was church. And then we would have prayers for each other at the end of it. And so that can be church. Why does church have to be people sitting in a row, a hymn and a song, and we don't have any singing at my second service. Sometimes people will play a song that means something to them through the speaker, but it's not a group that want to come together and sing. It's a group that want to talk about the week they've just had and the challenges for the week ahead. And they don't have anyone else to talk to about that. And so to me, that is how our church creates purpose and meaning and spirituality for that group.
Well, how many times do we read in the Bible where somebody comes up to Jesus and says, teacher or rabbi, and they ask a genuine question because they want to learn more?
Yeah, Jesus modeled that form of church. And I think that's also why he was killed, because he wasn't building the synagogues. He wasn't putting bums on seats. He was creating this movement that suddenly wasn't paying into the coffers of the structure. He wasn't paying parish share and MMM. There was controversy about that, wasn't there? Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. So often what stops denominations really releasing resources in this area is our model of funding churches comes from bums on seats paying a certain amount. So until we look at the financial structure and restructure the future of the church that way, or we take risks that, you're not going to get the money coming into the coffers, which is the space we're kind of in at the moment, you won't see these things released because they're often blocked for other reasons, aren't they? Yeah.
Well, in the remaining time that we've got, I know of another church here in Northern Ireland where I live now, down in Belfast, where you've mentioned the URC. There's a Methodist church down in Belfast where it's as if the church itself, the organisation, for want of a better word, has said, well, we've got this redundant building. What do you want to do with it? Here it is, off you go, which is phenomenal. So you've got the URC, you've got the Methodist Church. What other church denominations, organisations have you heard whereby there seems to be a fundamental shift saying, well, rather than just sell the building, Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I only know the small world I move in. But I know the Methodists have really led the way on this, and the Church of England has been working in the pioneering space for longer than all of us probably, but they have a more cumbersome structure. So the battles are harder for the people in that system. I think the URC, we probably have the most nimble structure, and the Methodists and Baptists probably in between. But yeah, the Baptists are doing things too. I think people genuinely see that particularly since COVID, it's been kind of accelerated, that the church has no future unless we start to do things differently. We have a lot of resource and not many people. So that's the very opposite to most community projects where you have a lot of people and no resource.
Yes.
It's about meeting the people where they're at, where God's already at work. But I also do believe in the institutional church, because one of the things we did in the 80s and 90s when we looked at the emerging church movement is we sold off buildings and we started all these little pub churches or this and that. This was in Australia. I don't know what happened in the UK. After those particular ministers moved on, those things closed, and it became almost a vanity exercise. Someone wanted to do a funky, trendy pub church in a nice neighbourhood. They sold off a building that had been around for 100 years and spent the money, but there's nothing left. So I really believe in a bit of a both-and model. I think that in 100 years' time, if I'm a person who's upset in a city centre, I want to know that there's a place I can find to go for prayer. I want to know that we leave that legacy. So what I'm trying to do is join the two together so that we have a both-and. And there's also people, and there will continue to be people, who actually like the structured existing model. But they're not all people, and they're probably fewer people, because it used to be people like me would go to that structure because the only way I could get teaching about the Bible was to do that. Yeah. I've now got the best teaching in the world on my phone. I can put a Brian McLaren or a Richard Raw or a Shane Claiborne podcast on, and I don't need to go to a Sunday church to be inspired by the preaching. Same goes for somebody like me, and this is what probably kept me in the church. I really love really good Penty worship. I like the music. My husband doesn't like it. I like it. So I would continue to engage in church because I really liked how that encouraged me. I liked how it made me feel.
Yes.
I don't call that worship. I call that, singing. So that kept me going. Well, now I can put on any form of music, in better and better form. Some of it's led and coordinated on my phone. So suddenly this was really evident with COVID and all the Zoom, and people don't need to go to buildings to meet those needs. The one thing we have left is belonging and being known. And how do we do that in buildings where you just come and sit and be talked at? So we have to change that, because it's the belonging need that remains the same, the personal human contact, the eating a meal together, that kind of being known, talking about your week and somebody knowing what struggles you're going through. And we never did that well in our bigger churches because you can just hide in a crowd. So I feel like that is the charism, the unique charism that the modern church could bring to this increasingly isolated society. But we have to break down all those structures around how we fund it, because it will mean that we want to intentionally keep our churches small. Because you can't be known in a group of 100 people, but you can be known in a group of 30.
Yes.
But that 30 on a Wednesday could also have another 30 on a Friday and another 30 on a Sunday. They're all different people being known. And then once a month you celebrate together and you share the highlights from your service or whatever. So we have to think really differently about that, and also about what are the barriers that, for me, and my passion is more working class chat. I'm a chavvy person, if you like. I use that as a compliment, not an insult. But, the church in England is very classist. And, where is a church that includes people like me and values people like me and allows people, who don't dress a certain way to be able to lead the communion and to share in the prayers, and not just to come and have things done to them, but to lead and share their gifts. And hopefully that's what we're trying to model.
See, I never thought a church was classist. Maybe I'm just naive in so many ways, because when you look back at the history of the church, especially over the past 150 years, and the so-called revivals, it wasn't happening in the upper echelons of life. It was happening down in the ground. So maybe that's something else to look at. Why have we lost that? But
then when it got institutionalised and there became money and resources available, who were the people that were naturally chosen as elders of churches, even when I was younger? People good at business, people who are educated, people who look a certain way. Yeah, so I think that the origin of the church was God's origin. It was never meant to. We've just been at one of the URC churches is the church that George Whitefield was at.
Oh, right, yes.
And my husband just preached in the church where George Whitefield preached.
Oh,
and
really?
I was in the church where the guy who started the Sunday school movement, the worldwide Sunday school movement, started the very first Sunday school. And so those histories were working people, that's right. But as soon as things get popular, the middle and upper classes take them over and take all the resource. And we see the same in any new pioneering thing. All of a sudden, everybody goes, why can't we have a pioneer? We don't need one. It's not relevant to your context. You already have all the resources you need. We're here for people who are not already in church. So you just have to resist that urge. But the church is very classist in who we give power to making decisions for. Otherwise, we would have taken down a lot of the structures already. Yeah, and don't even get me started on our legacies of slavery and, that history of the buildings that we inhabit.
Right, I'll make a note of that.
So I feel excited. I think the future of the church, for us in the URC, I feel like we were created for such a time as this. We're a nimble, supposedly egalitarian, democratic movement that's a merger of churches that don't necessarily have the same theology, and so we're conciliatory in our approach. So that should make us the right place for people to come to have differences and to want to do things differently. And so the challenge remains, why are we not that already? And in a lot of places, there has been some, change, yeah.
Well, the remaining 5 or 6 minutes, the first thing that I think is a really challenging point, and it was this paradox whereby loads of organisations saying we've got the people but not the resources, whereas in the church, it's like we've got resources, we just haven't got the people. In all other words, we should be playing one-upmanship here. Look at us, we've got the resources. Let's use them.
Well, maybe we should see the people as the church and give generously without an agenda. Maybe we should go and join where the people are, which is kind of what Jesus did, without the agenda of we will only help you if you tell people they have to pray a prayer. You know what I mean? And that is still very much the battles that we're having within the church structures. There's all these people. We've got a brilliant group of Muslim women who are lived experience, who all had special needs children, who, because there's no services for women like themselves, particularly there's largely single mothers who've been a bit excluded from their own religious communities. And what they're looking for is a space to be able to just run a support group each day of the week for other women like them to know that there's help out there to help them fill out forms, help them get EHCP plans. And to me, the church is the obvious place, but people say, oh, but how is that fitting our Christian mission? We're blessing the community and responding to a need. Surely that is our Christian mission. And I believe as we do that, our Muslim friends in that context are people of faith, and you don't know what journey they're going to go on. But you don't start with, oh, but they're a different religion to us, so we can't help them. Jesus helped people and they're like, we're surprised. Why is he helping them? And I think we need to go back to that. We should be helping the people that our former structures will say, why are we helping them? How is that Christian? Yeah.
We even talked to a Samaritan woman,
exactly
you can't get more opposite than that in those times then.
Yeah.
Well, this is a very challenging podcast. Keep going.
But it's reclaiming some of that heritage and blessing people with our resource. So I remember we had to ask when we were new to our denomination, could we put an Amazon box at the front of the church? Amazon wanted to pay us £1,600 to put a box there. So that's for people who don't drive, they can walk, return parcels or collect parcels. People who live in shared accommodation can't trust their parcels will get to them. And we were told that we don't see a missional value in that. Now, my husband's response was, our mission as a church is to bless our neighbourhood. So surely that the missional value is to see that they see the church as wanting to bless them and give something that they need, rather than, oh, you can only hire our hall if we charge you some money. And at the same time, it was bringing money into our church to be able to do other things. That's an example that's not uncommon that I've heard over and over and over again, are very similar. Why would we do that when where's the missional value? When you understand mission so narrowly as only getting people in to pray a prayer and then baptise them, that's not mission at all. That's doing things to people, telling people what to believe and trying to control how people go on a faith journey, as opposed to blessing our neighbourhood and being seen as, the abundance of Jesus was in a scarcity society with all the talk of budgets and austerity maybe coming back, all of that. We should be demonstrating the abundance of the love of God, and instead we display scarcity and then we think, oh, people don't want to come. It's because we have a scarcity mentality rather than one of abundance.
See, what I'm getting from you now is there's a clear thing here whereby we've heard the expression you're putting God into a box. And like on a Sunday, you might just open a box. Oh, there you are, God, thank you for an hour. And then you put him back again.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the Holy Spirit. If you believe in the Trinity and you believe that, the Holy Spirit in you can guide you, then by opening up the church the way you're saying it, you're not putting the Holy Spirit in the box, because you don't know everything.
Yeah.
You don't know when that person is going to make a commitment.
Yeah.
And so consequently, the fact you are there, you're like a midwife, or you're part of the birthing structure. I know you've had children. You didn't see just one
job.
Yeah, you didn't see one person in the whole time. You saw several people bring you to the birth, and then there were some more people after that. And surely, sorry, I'm getting quite animated here, quite annoyed.
No, but that's exactly right. But it's also, where do we go with people who are not interested? And some of my best friends and volunteers are not, and they've been through that process. Shouldn't we still just love them as if they're just as important as somebody who's come to faith? But the church always moves on to the next person and says, oh, and I just think, surely that is our Christian mission, to love people unconditionally. We have taken our grace-filled, unconditional love of Jesus and made a conditional, controlled model of evangelism and discipleship, which is a really unattractive version of this so-called Christianity, and it's no wonder people don't want to be part of it. Even the people within it don't want to be part of it often. So unless we go back to the original of blurry boundaries, and that's where all the risk is, because you're not in control. You don't know if people are going to follow the steps you want them to have. You don't know how they're going to behave. You don't know if we allow a group of Muslim women to use our building every week and we join their group. So it's not just give them the building, it's join their group, do the teas and coffees for them, do what you can. And so you become part of their group. And that's the bit people don't want to do, because that takes time and energy, and you're not in control. And I could be doing better things with my time. I think there's nothing better than you could do with your time than joining a group of people in your neighbourhood who are meeting a need that's unmet. And as we join that, we can be one of the best volunteers in that group, can't we?
Well, you've got a 30-second summary to finish it. But I would like to summarise by what you're saying, I think, by a certain person who you may have heard of in the past, a chap called Tony Campolo, who you know very well.
Yes.
I think it was through him you actually met your husband as well. Am I right in saying?
Yes, yep, that's right.
It's something that he would always finish with. Shane Claiborne, who you've already mentioned, we talk about this as well in the previous podcast. We also talk about it in our tribute to Tony. And that was that, you get to heaven, and who should be at the pearly gates but Jesus himself. And he said, did you clothe him? Did you do this? Did you do that?
Yeah.
And you go, no, but I opened up the church from 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock once a week.
For prayer. Yeah. Instead of living prayer. Yeah. No, exactly right.
So now we've got all these theatres. You've done the world tour. You've speaking to thousands upon thousands of people in your 5 minutes. You have to do a summary of 30 seconds. Faith, and what that means to you, spelling RISK. How would you summarise it all up, please?
I think what I would say is that it's not for me to tell people how to live risk and live their faith, but the best thing I can do is model it. So I think let's spend all of our energy, our best energy, on defining what we're for by living what we're for, and less time worrying about what we're against. And as we do that, we trust God as we step out in faith, which always involves a risk. So if you're not doing anything risky in your church and ministry, then the question is, where is Jesus in that? That would be my summary.
Wow, Angie, what a podcast. It's not often I get animated. It was a positive thing as well. Wow, what a podcast. Hopefully a lot of people would have got a lot out of this. And if you want to contact us, please do. It's ogc@accessradio.biz. Biz is spelled B-I-Z, of course. Angie, thank you so much. What's going to be happening to you for 2026?
Well, I have no idea. I hope that we will see a couple of new worshipping communities emerge across the West Midlands URC churches. Yeah, I'll follow my nose. I don't normally plan that far ahead. I am off to Thailand for a couple of weeks.
Wow.
And then come back and get stuck in for another year of trying to support people doing things differently. Yeah.
Fantastic. Anji Barker, thank you so much again. It's been an incredible podcast. Thank you. And if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. It means a lot to us. Thank you very much indeed. Next time on Off-Grid Christianity.
Yeah, certainly Christians are not great when they hear about divorce because they think it shouldn't happen. And I think it shouldn't happen, but sometimes it does. For me, I preach about this at the moment in my new preach. I came to a point where I had to stop believing for a miracle whilst at the same time maintaining my faith in the God who does miracles. And they seem quite similar. They're next door neighbors, but they live very different lives. Not everything comes back, but we have to hold on to the God who invented redemption and loves to transform narratives into redemptive stories.
So please join me with special guest, comedian, as in comedian and preacher, Andy Kind. And wow, it's a podcast where we get deep, and it's got nothing to do with humour or jokes. Have a listen. You'll be really encouraged. Until then, cheerio.